Welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat podcast. I'm your host, Andy Storch, and I'm excited that you're joining me today for another great conversation to help you up your game and improve your capabilities in the world of talent development. And today we have a very special guest who's going to be talking with us about leadership, as well as networking and many other things. Keith Ferrazzi is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Who's Got Your Back and Never Eat Alone, and the founder and chairman of Ferrazzi Greenlight, a research institute focusing on human behavior change and its role in business transformation. Keith has been named one of the 25 most influential management thinkers by Thinkers 50. He regularly works with Fortune 500 companies to help them achieve enhanced growth and productivity through transformed leadership approaches. He's a former CMO of Deloitte and Starwood Hotels, and he brings practical business experience alongside his thought leadership and organizational transformation. Keith has been a contributor to Forbes, Fortune, Harvard Business Review, and has appeared on CNN, CNBC, and other major media outlets, including now this podcast. And he's received his bachelor's degree from Yale University and his MBA from Harvard Business School. His latest book is called Never Lead Alone, which builds on his decades of experience helping leaders transform their organizations through collaborative leadership. And I am so excited to have him here with us today. Keith, welcome to the show.
Andy, that's an intimidating introduction. Thank you very much.
Hey, I do my research.
You really pulled out all the stops.
Yeah, you've done such amazing stuff. And as I was telling you before we started recording, this is really special for me personally, because I read your book, Never Eat Alone, when it came out in 2005. I was just starting business school, coming from a background as a very shy kid who had very few friends in high school, came out of my shell a little bit in college, actually joined a fraternity, much to the shock of my parents, and started making more friends that way. But when I got to business school in 2005, I knew I needed to make a change. And I went to a school that was known for its network. And I read your book, which was absolutely perfect. It really changed my life and set me on a course of prioritizing networking with everything I did, reaching out and building relationships very intentionally and thoughtfully, and really getting to know people. And by using the advice that you gave in that book, I showed up at school, met a ton of people, and ended up being elected president of my class and then president of the 700-person MBA program. And as I tell people often, I don't think I come with any particular special leadership skills. I think it was purely because I knew more people than anybody else, because I had just been out there intentionally. I mean, you know how that works, right? And just thoughtfully getting to know people. And I've referred back to that book many times over the years. I've recommended it. I mentioned it in my own book, which has a couple of chapters on networking. And it's just really awesome to be able to talk to you now 20 years later after reading it for the first time.
Well, thank you. And yeah, this is the 20th year anniversary of the book, actually. So you were one of the OG readers.
That's right.
We've rewritten it once to really catch up with the social media age that we're living in today, and how do you build your networks, in a world of social media. But I think that's a good guide, to be honest, for our conversation today. It was a 20-year journey for me from Never Eat Alone, which is all about building those relationships that are so important to your career and so important for change management with any chief talent officer. So any talent professional, as you're thinking about how to be impactful in your business, understanding how to build a relationship action plan inside of the company to meet and align with the strategic goals of the company so that you can build and serve the business better. So that's probably a good conversation for today. And then the other one is the 20 years of research that we've been doing since that book, focused on high-performing teams. And I really do think that there's a big miss in the world of talent, that we think so much about employee engagement. We think so much about individual performance. We don't think enough about high-performing teams. And I'd love to spend some time opening the aperture for your talent professionals around the importance of teams and what are some of the critical shifts, as my book talks about, the 10 shifts from leadership to teamship, and how can we make that journey?
Yeah, I definitely want to go there to talk about the evolution of leadership and what you see now as the importance of teamship. Just to go back to the idea of networking, you mentioned you updated the book a few years ago. And often when I tell people about your book, I say, like, a lot of the advice is timeless, but there are some things that, seem a little antiquated. I remember a lot of mentions of BlackBerries and things that people don't use.
Those are gone
anymore. I'm just curious, as you've been out there consulting and networking and still building your business and brand and everything over the last 20 years, obviously a lot of things have changed with the iPhone and social media. LinkedIn, I think, was just starting out maybe when you published that book. And now so many companies have, hybrid and remote workforces. When it comes to building a network to support you in your career, do you think that things have changed considerably, or is it still pretty much the same principles with some different tools?
I think it's that the
Yeah.
principles are the same. The tools are abundant, and with AI now,
Hmm.
the ability, I've always had at least 2 to 3 administrative assistants in my business helping me manage my network. And actually, today I have even more because I've got multiple communities that I'm fostering because I really have a desire to live the richest, fullest life. I have a group of CIOs, chief information officers, and chief HR leaders, CIOs and CHROs. I've got about 100 of them that work to talk about how technology is transforming AI. I'm sorry, how technology, AI, is transforming the talent lifecycle. And we're really detailed and focused on recruiting. We're focused on employee development. We're focused on performance and performance management. And it's been amazingly powerful to see how technology infused with HR can
Mm.
change both of the worlds of those two functions. So I've got that community. And I'm now a venture partner at a company called Lightspeed. And so I've got the community of founders. I built a home in San Francisco within the year, and I'm spending a lot of time with AI founders, looking at what their disruption is that they're bringing to organizations. One of the third thing we should talk about is how the talent profession needs to stay relevant in this emerging AI world. And I
Mm.
definitely want to spend a little bit of time on that in here.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I was going to say a lot of what we talk about on this podcast, we talk with people about performance management, how the employee life cycle and the employee experience is evolving. That idea of going from recruiting into onboarding into development, and then some people eventually leaving. And how do you maintain a great experience in those relationships and give people opportunities to grow in their careers? Because the place where I work a lot in career development, the latest McKinsey study shows the number one reason people leave organizations now is a lack of perceived career growth. And
Yeah.
are you providing those opportunities? But to your point, how do you leverage AI and the technology to keep up and provide these? And how do you see those things shifting, since we're on that topic, in how organizations are providing that experience and managing
Yeah.
performance and talent?
Well, first of all, I mean, I was just yesterday at a very, very large, well-known tech company speaking to their top 700 leaders. And my challenge to them was, and it would be the same thing that I would hope, and it was the chief talent officer, Danielle, who brought me in to speak, which I'd love to introduce you to. She's superior. Um, the challenge to them was this next 3 years is going to be one of the most disruptive opportunities, and I say opportunities, for any of you in this room. There's 700 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, each and every one of you at a minimum needs to be identifying how existing generative AI tools can help you re-engineer the role of yourself and the folks that report to you. And that's role redefinition. And the way one does that is you take the role that you have, you pixelate it, turn it into a bunch of little puzzle pieces, and then reassemble it with partnership with generative AI tools. But then there's another layer up from that, which is how do you re-engineer entire workflows end to end? And that idea of being a process engineer of what you do, where you can step out of the role you have and say, maybe my role doesn't even exist in the future, but how do I help the mission of what I used to feed? But how do I help re-engineer the end to end? Now, there is no excuse for somebody to leave a company today or a lack of growth opportunities
Mm.
because all bets are off. Anybody who wants to be, my advice to anybody from a career perspective today is that there's two primary competencies that will make you relevant in an AI enabled world. One is proactivity, and the other is deep curiosity.
Hmm.
So if you're sitting in a role today, your role, whoever you are watching this, if you're sitting in a role today, you should be leaning in and figuring out what questions relative to the mission that you serve. If you're in talent and your job is to acquire the best professionals and make sure that in the first, period of time they are onboarded effectively, and then they have, speed to, if you're in sales ops, how do I get speed to quota? Right? So that's my job. I hire people and I want to get speed to quota reduced. And then how do I make sure that I'm constantly elevating the proficiencies of these individuals and their interdependencies? Now that's your job, right? What are the questions that are unanswered today in that path with AI? And if you see an unanswered question, a dark spot, a lack of clarity, your job is to rush to that, dive into it, and be the Sherpa. You're not going to be the leader. I wrote a book called Never, where is it over here? Leading Without Authority. Um, 5 books. You got to sometimes,
A lot of books.
sometimes the titles get a little messed up, but you need to be the leader of, figuring that out. And you're going to do it by forming a team. And this is the first thing we teach in my new book, Never Lead Alone, 10 Shifts from Leadership to Teamship. You need to be a leader of a team, and it doesn't have anything to do with org chart or permission. It has to do with proactivity and curiosity. Your ability to lean in and figure out across silos, etc., how to answer that question, bring the right people to the table, bring the right technologies to the table. That is going to be your unleashing of your leadership and your potential. Those of you who take that proactive, curious, tech enabled approach to your jobs, you will have jobs. Those of you who don't will probably be replaced by AI.
Yeah.
Full stop. I just had this 60 CIOs and CHROs. I brought them all to the TED conference, and we were looking at recruitment. And at the beginning, everybody thought, well, AI is good to enable talent professionals to sort through resumes, right? By the time we were done, the group felt that 70% of what a talent recruitment professional does will be replaced fully by AI within 2 years.
Hmm.
There's a company that has moved, fastest growing company in the United States. It's moved from 1 million ARR to 100 million ARR, and they are fully outplacing the talent professional, getting HR out of the hiring process. It goes straight to the business manager, negotiates the job description. It posts it on job boards. It prioritizes the interviews. It gives the interviewer recommendations on what questions to ask, audits the calls, makes recommendations on candidates, and helps in the onboarding process when they come on board.
Wow. That's
So
that's amazing.
this is what we're, by the time we were done, as I said, 70% of recruitment talent professionals will probably be out of work in the job that they currently do in the next 2 to 3 years. Facebook is using this. So many big companies are using this.
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I agree with you. And there's a lot of people that of course are afraid AI is going to come take our jobs, and it will for many people. But what I've also heard the comeback, which is that it's only coming for the people that are not leveraging AI. If you don't leverage AI, it's going to take your job. But if you learn
Yeah,
how to use AI to become
it's going
better
to
at
take
your
a lot of
job,
people's jobs.
yeah,
It's going to take a lot of people's jobs. And there's a the funny joke of two guys in the woods walking through the woods, and all of a sudden a bear comes upon
right,
them. You know this one, right?
yeah,
And the one guy sits down to put his shoes on, as his tennis shoes, because he was in hiking boots. And the
yeah,
other guy's like, "What are you doing? You can't outrun a bear." And the guy goes, "I'm not. I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you."
right,
So for those of you listening, you need to be ahead of anybody else in the use of AI. Now, that if you're a call center rep, if you're in the call center answering phone calls, all of your jobs are going to go.
hmm,
So that there's not going to be like, oh well, if you use enabled tools. No, AI is going to do a very good job of responding in customer experience requests, etc. Period. You don't
right,
need call centers in the near term. only for the rare individuals. And so, yes, there might be a very small group of individuals that'll be there. But if you're the person who was a call center rep, figured out how to use the tools better than everybody else, taught everybody else, and then constantly looked at what, as AI was coming, what were the next questions to be answered, and you were all of a sudden seen as that person out ahead of everyone else, figuring out problems and forming teams to do that, you will be found a job other places in the company.
Right. So always
Because you're a real
looking-
leader, because
Right.
you are a real leader. And it's your ability to form teams, which is the point of this book. First chapter of the new book is all about the formation of loose teams, flash teams. How do you form teams across silos, create a social contract of how you're going to work together, get the job done while you're constantly forming other teams that are needed to be a disruptive agent of change?
Well, yeah, well, I wanted to ask you and transition to this book, Never Lead Alone, and ask you about the evolution of leadership because you've been working in consulting. You made a very fast move into leadership yourself back when you were working at Deloitte and then Starwood, and then I know you've consulted with lots of organizations and studied this. I've been running leadership development workshops for about a decade now, so not quite as long, but I've seen how leadership has been changing, and I'm curious, how have you seen leadership change over the last few years and why this new emphasis on this idea of teamship and forming teams?
Yeah. So I believe the book talks about 10 shifts
Okay.
from leadership to teamship. There's probably 3 of them that are disproportionately important. One of them is the redefinition of team. The shift from my team is who works for me to my team is the group of people that I need around a critical objective goal, KPI, etc. So redefinition of teams to flash teams becomes a really important area of a shift. And it's interesting. I mean, most leaders still think that there's my team that reports to me, and then I've got this group I've got to collaborate with, go get buy-in from, etc. That is debilitative. Teams need to be thought of, and in the future, there's a Microsoft study that just came out, which we're going to be working with them. They're hiring us to do this research. How does AI help you create and form these flash teams? So how does AI enable teaming across the matrix, right? So that's the number one shift. So if you're a leader, you need to be thinking about amorphous teams around goals. Teams are around goals, not around org charts. So that's number one shift as a leader. Second thing is most leaders know now they've got to give feedback. But leaders need to know that they need to get the team to give each other feedback. The highest performing teams that I've studied in 20 years are practicing what I call co-elevation, where the team steps up 30%, meets the leader in leadership. They're giving each other feedback. The leader holds accountable the team holds each other accountable. The team makes sure each other's energy is strong. So each of those are shifts from conflict avoidance to candor among the team, where the team is willing to challenge each other when it's risky to do so, shifting from, giving traditional report outs in a room on a critical initiative to actually engaging in a practice that we call stress testing, where teams are always beating up each other's work because they won't let each other fail. There's an old mindset that says, I won't challenge my peer because it's throwing them under the bus. The new mindset is, we're going to challenge each other because we refuse to let each other fail. Now, that's not taught in traditional leadership. That's a mind-blowing awakening. What are the practices that you need to do to get your team to support each other? And that's what the book's all about. The book teaches leaders how to create high-performing teams in simple practices. So there's 10 shifts, 32 practices. Each chapter has, 2 to 4 practices in it. And those practices are what the leaders need to do to unleash the team's performance, like moving from report outs to stress testing, moving from 12 people in a room having a conversation, starting a collaboration, to what we call meeting shifting, where you start the collaboration before you come into the room. If you do that, 10 out of 12 people will feel that they're fully heard. Whereas if you start the collaboration in the room, 4 out of 12 people will feel that they're fully heard.
because
So really
they don't feel like they're
simple.
getting a chance to really participate or share. You don't have enough time to
No,
get.
not everybody. The four people that are heard, everybody knows who they are. They're the same four people that's always heard.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean that other people don't have strong points of view. It means they may be introverted. They may just need a beat to think about it. They may be new to the subject. And had we introduced it early, they could have thought about it and been, contemplative and added. And also, there's all of those small um, prejudices that exist among leaders about who they want to hear, the people they know, the people there's voices they're comfortable with, etc. And they're missing so much. We're missing so much. And in the world of, particularly when your teams aren't just who you report to, your teams are more dispersed. We need to start collaborating with them more abundantly in order to get the breakthrough solution. So if we're going to be teaming across silos, we can't do it through meetings. So meeting shifting is one of the primary chapters of the book as well. So the idea is that we need to start getting teammates to step up and meet leadership. But leaders need to know how to unleash that. And that's what we teach, those high return practices.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about meetings. I think Amazon and maybe Google and some other organizations have famously done this, right? Where the information goes out ahead of time and you really need to have everybody on the same playing field. And then you go into the meeting just to hash out and make that decision, not to learn new information.
Yeah. So Amazon has a practice where they read the memo in the meeting at the beginning.
Hmm.
I'm trying to work with folks like Andy Jassy to shift that before the meeting. And yes, Google has the famous Google stack, the collaborative stack, which is really extraordinary
Yeah.
in terms of being able to collaborate outside of meetings. When I'm coaching one of the kids out of Stanford who are starting some AI company worth billions of dollars, if I were to say to them, "Hey, let's have a meeting on this topic," they'd look at me puzzled. They
Mm.
they would look at me and they would say, "Well, how do we have a meeting? We haven't collaborated yet."
Mm.
So collaboration happens outside of meetings. Meetings are what you use to land the plane. And it reduces the cycle time of getting change to happen. The average meeting starts, you have 12 people in the room, four people are heard, then you have the meeting after the meeting, you have the private DMing,
Yeah.
and then you have to schedule another meeting because someone missed it. Bullshit. I mean,
Yeah.
collaboration in 1 week can happen, and then we land the plane. If we need to have a disagreement and an argument, we can get in the room and hash it out and done.
And
And you don't even need the 12 people to get in the room. So this is what I'm hoping your talent professionals will start to realize. My big hope of talent professionals. I was on a podcast the other day with somebody who only focuses in HR. My big my big hope for talent professionals is that you will start to realize that your job is to not just teach leadership competencies. Your job is to re-engineer how work happens.
yeah.
That's about to change a lot. And you will be left behind if you, as a talent professional, are not teaching your leaders and your teams how the changing of collaboration and work is happening and how the social contract among a team needs to change. And the great thing is I give you practices that are so easy. As a simple practice, I call it a candor break, where in the middle of the meeting, if you were to say to people, okay, if we really hash this out, everybody be say yes, and then they'd leave, and still somebody would say, well, I didn't agree with that. And instead, I would ask a team, okay, what's not being said that should be said in this room? You'd still not hear it. But if I assign candor to the room, and if I say to the room, I want you to pair up in twos, and in 5 minutes, I want you to decide what are the most important things that aren't being shared in this room that need to be shared. And you're each going to come back and report that.
Hmm.
A simple assignment of the kind of culture you want to have is game changing. Now you've made it an assignment and they'll do it. People will be compliant to assignments. I wrote a piece in Fortune. Like culture change is not difficult. Just add new practices. If you
Yeah.
want to challenge culture, add a practice of a stress test. If you want a generous, curious culture, add a practice where people are asked to weigh in on ideas in small group discussion and then come back and share with somebody what they might be missing. So you turn the culture you want into practices. And that's not something that most talent professionals think about. Our leadership training is devoid of very specific practices that can be used and eaten like popcorn. Like the reason you love Never Eat Alone is it had tons of really simple practices that allowed you to help fortify your network,
Mhm.
cultivate your network. And we did the same thing with leadership and teamship.
Yeah. I'm curious for people in talent development that are involved in building leadership development programs, listening to this, maybe nodding along, thinking like, yeah, we probably need to make some changes. What are some of the biggest red flags or things to notice that like, okay, we definitely need to make a shift and we need to move towards more of this idea of teamship and what are
We
those things we
we
need
have
to
a
do?
diagnostic tool we give in the book, so you can use
Sure.
it. It's there. And one of the questions is we challenge each other in the room when it's risky to do so.
Mm.
If you do an employee engagement survey, like Gallup's Q12 or whatever, it asks questions about individual belief system of psychological safety, etc. But I want to start asking what people's perception is of the teams they're working on. That's a different angle than what their perception is of their presence in the organization, which is employee engagement. So we asked a question yesterday of a group. We just asked, do we as a culture challenge each other when it's risky to do so? Answer relative to the team you're working on. Now, when I'm coaching a team, I ask that question, and that number on a scale of 0 to 5 is usually in the high ones or low twos. Once they start practicing the candor practices, that number goes right up into the fours. So I want your folks to be curious, go into the book and pull out the questions and start asking yourself. The other one is like this one was very low yesterday. Um, the question was, are we responsible for lifting each other's energy up? What we're about to go into, like the pandemic, drained our energy.
Mhm.
We hit the wall. We were all very frustrated and fractured and fearful. And we're about to go into that with AI. It's going to be the same kind of call for resilience that we had. And it's going to be important that the team owns each other's energy. So we talk about employee engagement. We're doing all these, but we treat it like it's an individual nodes. Like you're teaching folks to be good with their careers, and that lifts their engagement because they see a navigation path to do that, and that's an engaging thing. Just like I said at the beginning, you can be the leader without authority. Go in there, find the problems, answer the problems. That will improve employee engagement, right? But there's another way to increase employee engagement, and it's getting the team to have each other's back.
Mm.
And it's not a social contract. When I ask teams, do you have each other's back? Are you responsible for each other's energy? Do you know that Keith has a mom who's 92, he's worried about in Pittsburgh because he sees her a few times a year, and now he's starting to count the number of times he'll probably see his mother before her passing. Right. And so if that's a stressor on my mind, are you aware of that so that you can ask me about my mom? No, most teams don't. They don't even go there.
Right.
So there's not a social contract. And most of the social contracts of do we have each other's back? Are we responsible to lift each other's energy? Is usually down at like 15, 20%.
Mm.
So these are the kind of practice. And then we add practices of doing a monthly energy check where the team shares what's draining their energy with an intention of how can we help so that the leader themselves doesn't have to run around playing whack-a-mole with everybody. The team owns each other's energy. Once again, shifting from leadership, where this leader is standing as a maypole and everyone's dancing around them, to the team lifts up and takes care of each other.
Let's talk about influence. You mentioned working with not just your direct team, but other teams, other people that are on the organization. You mentioned your other book, Leading Without Authority. This is a topic that I feel like is coming up more and more in leadership as well. So many people in talent development tell me that we have, quote, flatter organizations, less hierarchical these days. Seems to be the way things are trending, at least the United States and the Western world, which is requiring people to find ways to be more influential to get things done. When you can't just tell people what to do, and people don't want to be told what to do anyway, right? You got to connect them with a kind of a purpose and get them on board. So, what are the things that you've learned that you teach are really important for leaders and really all employees to know about influencing, especially when you don't have direct authority?
Well, it's interesting because every one of my books goes back into prior content and pulls critical nuggets into it, right?
Mm.
So leading without authority is really teaching people how to use never eat alone inside of a company. Like, how do you turn never eat alone into a product productivity work tool?
Right.
So
Basically, like what I did in business school, going meeting a bunch of people, building relationships. How do you do that inside an organization so that
how do you do
you
inside
know
of an
someone in
organization?
finance and IT and legal and HR, and you can get things done faster?
That's right. That's right. You know how to, you have the social permission to build those teams. Yeah, exactly.
And so that's the
So
same thing in leadership that you've got to be, it starts with building those relationships and building that social trust.
and you know the core of the book, which is you do it through generosity. You do it with authenticity. People think of networking as a function of, running around passing out business cards. It's about how do you truly make other people successful around you? And you can do that in volume if you have a system, right? So how do you become that person that everyone trusts, everybody comes to, you become that node of influence. Um, I had mentioned to you that I realized that with all of the work we do now with talent and teams, and we're clearly the hands down leading researchers in high performing teams today. Our research institute is called on by the Microsofts of the world to figure out how our IP around teams and everything that I've done in the last 20 years around teams is in that book. It's amazing. I really decided to go open source with it, to be honest.
Mm.
But what what became important was to realize those core threads of being a master connector, those core threads of building your network, those still are so relevant today that we actually started a course that your viewers can go and take a look at. It's called Connected Success. Go to connectedsuccess.com. And I'm so excited about it because it's cohort learning. Once a week, everybody comes together, they get a mission. So, real active, every month, you're being charged with how do you go out and build your network in service of your career.
Mm.
And then you have small peer-to-peer coaching groups. We give you a coach, and it's an 8-week program. And then at the end, everybody comes, and people come from all over the world, from Poland, from Singapore. They fly in to my home for dinner. It's a voluntary thing. You don't have to come to graduation, but people have gotten so bonded and like you, so grateful for the progress that they've made. They all want to come and meet each other, and
Yeah.
so it's so much fun every year. Actually, on June 6th, we're going to do it here at my home again.
That's fantastic. And that's got to be so rewarding for you as well
Yeah,
to see
it
how
is.
people are building their networks and to be able to come together and hear those stories. That reminds me, as you have done so much research on teams and you have organizations coming to you to consult on this, you mentioned high performing teams. I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but obviously in today's hybrid and virtual world, the team dynamic has changed a little bit versus, from the let's just all jump in the conference room to now we need to get on Zoom and manage the side conversations
Yeah.
and the technology and things like that. So how does that change things, if at all? Or is it sort of like, again, with networking, it's the same principles, just using
No,
the
no,
right
no.
tools?
Look, it should have changed before. So, like I said, everybody piling into the boardroom for a meeting was ineffective when we were in the office together.
Hmm.
It's even more ineffective when we're on Zoom. So you need to be much more purposeful in how you collaborate, much more purposeful in how you build relationships. All CEOs are saying, let's get everybody back to the office. We need to get our culture back again. They're practicing what I call serendipity bonding. So on a scale of 0 to 5, the average relationship score of a teammate is in the mid to high twos when they were in the office. When they went to the pandemic, it decreased because they didn't have a bump into the hallway, talk in the coffee room.
Right.
But for those teams that were fully virtual and practiced purposeful bonding in their teams on a monthly basis, there's an entire chapter on that bonding in the book. Their scores went up to the high threes, low fours. So purposeful, just like we taught in Never Eat Alone, purposeful doesn't mean fake. it means effective. So you
Right.
need to take all that serendipitous networking stuff and make it a purposeful relationship plan.
Yeah.
You need to take your culture building and make it very purposeful. And when you do, I don't care if you're virtual or physical, it's very effective.
Mm. I like that. So you just got to be, and I kind of came to this realization, and we talked to you about this as well after the pandemic hit, that when it comes to networking, the opportunity is still there. You just don't bump into the people in the office. So you just got to be more intentional, more
Okay.
purposeful, like you said, and reaching out to people, building those connections, asking those questions.
Do you, do you have a community of chief talent officers?
So I do have a community I run called the Talent Development Think Tank. We host an occasional conference, and then we have an online community. It's not fully chief talent officers; it's all levels of talent development. But
Yeah,
yeah, we have a lot of great conversations there.
great. That's important. Everybody should be having a community. If and you think about, even if you're a talent professional inside of a company, you should be cultivating a community of how AI is changing talent,
Hmm.
right? I mean, that's a job you can have by pulling people together and maximizing your leadership by hosting,
Yeah.
just like you were doing.
Well,
So, yeah,
the other element of this that I've been thinking about lately that just plays right into what you're talking about with teamship and everything else is that the Surgeon General released that report a couple of years ago on the epidemic of loneliness. People are
yeah,
working remotely; they're less connected. As far as building real relationships with people than ever because they're not involved in their community. Attendance religious organizations is down. I think the last bastion, the opportunity to build those connections and those relationships and
in the
collaboration is
workplace.
happening at work, is in the workplace, right?
But it's not happening purposefully. That's why you need
Right.
teamship. You
Right.
need to be purposeful in the building of those connections in teams. And by the way, that wasn't just last year. I mean, there was a book called Bowling Alone that
Hmm.
was during the 80s that started talking about the degradation of our groups. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me see. We hit Never Eat Alone
Yep.
and invited folks to come to
Come to your
connectedsuccess.com.
house. Yep.
We hit the new book. We hit the new
Right.
book. We talked about AI.
Yep.
I think we were pretty good on this show and hitting all that we wanted to hit.
I think we hit everything. There was just one more thing I wanted to ask you about.
Please.
One of the hottest topics in talent development, besides AI, is organizations shifting to what many people are calling "quote" a skills-based
Hmm,
type organization. And I'm curious if you looked into this and how
very much.
this leadership style can support people in developing the most valuable skills of the future.
Yeah. So I'm also going to offer your folks to join one other thing. So when my friend Tony Shea from Zappos died,
Yeah.
after I picked myself up off the floor, he was one of my best friends.
Mm.
Um, I started the Tony Shea Award. So people can go to thetonysheaaward.com. And the reason was Tony was always that person. When I caught up with him, he exposed something to me that was fundamentally new and different. He came up to, he would always be sharing with me his experiments in holacracy, his experiments in skills badging, his experiments, etc. And I learned about skills badging and skills um, sort of what I call pixelization. So what's very important was when I started studying AI about 5 years ago, I realized that the way that we're going to navigate how AI interfaces with critical roles is the blowing up of a role into puzzle pieces, pixelizing it, and then reconfiguring and figuring out which of those pieces are AI and which of those pieces are human. The companies that had already done their skills work, breaking critical roles down to skills, its skills and practices, are the ones that had a big leap forward. So, big proponent of that. And I think it's a necessary predecessor to really getting AI right in companies.
Yeah, so important. You mentioned the Tony Shea Award. If anybody wants to check that out, just know that it's Tony Shea, HSIEH, award.com. Keith, this has been fantastic. Given our listeners are in talent development, we've talked a lot about developing leaders, developing people, how that needs to change. Anything else from the book or anything else that you've done or learned recently, especially working with CHROs, heads of talent, that you think it's important for people to be thinking about as we enter these disruptive 3 years, as you mentioned?
I think that the most important thing is what we kind of started with, which is be curious, be proactive, build your teams independent of your org charts and start solving the problems, and your relevancy and um, your value to the company will be assured. And the tools that we have for you, there's the book Never Eat Alone, of course, that helps. That's the book that you were inspired by. There's an active course in that called beyondconnections.com. And there's the new book, Never Lead Alone, 10 Shifts from Leadership to Teamship. And hopefully we'll see each other at LinkedIn or other places as we go from here.
Absolutely. Well, Keith, thank you so much. This has been amazing. The new book, again, is called Never Lead Alone, 10 Shifts from Leadership to Teamship. It's available on Amazon, wherever you get books. You can also go to keithferrazzi.com to learn more about everything that he's doing. And Keith, I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk with us today. I am so excited I got a chance to meet you. I'm looking forward to keeping in touch
Thanks.
and talking with you more about this stuff in the future.
Yeah, text me, Andy. I look forward to being in touch. Anytime you're in the States, and I think I'll be in Barcelona soon, actually.
You got it. All right, take care.
Cheers.